All right, diving right in. We're taking on English learning mistakes this time.
Oh, those are always fun. Everyone makes them.
For sure, we're all about turning those mistakes into, like, stepping stones, right?
Absolutely, got to learn for those stumbles.
Exactly. We're looking at this article, Top 10 Mistakes English Learners Make, with tips on how to actually fix them.
Sounds like a good plan. Where do we start?
Well, first up, that classic trap, direct translation.
Oh, yeah. That one gets everyone at some point.
Like, you want to say, I have 25 years, but, it just doesn't work in English.
Right. Our brains cling to what we know, even when it sounds a little strange.
So how do we break out of that and start thinking in English?
Start small. Imagine you're making coffee. Describe it in your head, in English.
I am pouring water. I am adding coffee. Something like that.
Exactly. Simple stuff, but it gets those gears turning in English.
Love it. Makes it feel less overwhelming, too, you know? Like you don't have to be fluent overnight.
Not at all. It's a process.
Okay, next up. Something I think we all struggle with. Grammar paralysis.
Oh, that deer in the headlights feeling when you're trying to speak.
And you're so worried about the grammar, you just freeze up.
Yep. Grammar's important, but fluency is key, especially when you're starting out.
It's like being afraid to dance because you might step on someone's toes.
Right. You got to just move. So how do we avoid the grammar freeze?
Well, I was thinking maybe learning grammar in context could help.
Excellent point.
Mm.
Observation is key, like watching movies or reading books.
Almost like absorbing the grammar naturally, right?
Precisely. And you can even put on English subtitles for an extra boost.
Nice. Okay, this next one might seem surprising. Neglecting pronunciation.
You'd be surprised how much it impacts understanding.
No, I've been there. One time I tried to order dessert instead of dessert.
Oh, dear. I hope you didn't get a plate of sand.
Yeah, it was a learning experience for sure. But seriously, pronunciation is so key for clear communication.
It is. So how do we tackle this one?
Well, what about mimicking? Like finding a podcast with clear pronunciation and trying to copy it.
Absolutely, like having a pronunciation coach right there with you.
And what about those really tricky sounds?
The International Phonetic Alphabet can be a lifesaver.
The what now?
It's a system of symbols for each sound. It can really break things down. Like there are different symbols for the ETH in think and the teeth in that.
Wow, like a secret code to unlock those sounds?
Exactly. Tons of resources online for that too.
Awesome. Okay, moving on to a mistake close to my heart. Limited vocabulary.
Ah, yes. The quest for more words.
Now, I love words, but everyone can benefit from expanding their vocabulary.
100%. Makes your English more colorful and precise.
Instead of just good, you can say fantastic or marvelous.
Exactly. Even starting with 5 new words a day can make a difference.
And maybe even make it a challenge. Try using those words in conversations.
Love it. Or, stories can help too.
Like making up a little story with each new word to remember it better.
Exactly. Makes it more engaging and helps cement the meaning.
All right, this next one can make you feel lost in conversation. Passive listening.
Happens to the best of us, especially when English is spoken quickly.
You're nodding along, but you have no idea what they just said.
Totally. It's about making listening a more active process, a skill you can develop.
So it's more than just hearing. It's about engaging with what's being said.
Yes. And a technique called shadowing can help with that.
Shadowing? What's that?
You listen to a recording and try to repeat it, matching their speed and tone.
Whoa, like becoming a language ninja.
Kind of. Helps you understand better. A to D improves your pronunciation.
Very cool. Okay, last one for today. Something I think holds a lot of people back, the fear of making mistakes.
Understandable. But it's such a crucial part of learning anything new.
It's that voice in your head saying, don't speak up, you'll mess up.
But mistakes are just feedback. They help us grow.
So true. They're like little course corrections on the road to fluency.
Exactly. So how do we combat that fear and make mistakes? Our friends.
Well, I was thinking maybe creating safe practice zones would help.
Excellent idea. Find places where you feel comfortable making mistakes.
Like language exchange apps. You can connect with other learners.
Perfect example. And celebrate those little wins too, each time you speak up.
Definitely. Each mistake is a step closer to fluency.
That's the spirit. So, Even when you nail the grammar and vocab, there's still this whole other layer.
Oh, absolutely. Like you can know the words, but still totally miss the mark culturally.
Exactly. Gestures, humor, even politeness, it can all be so different across cultures.
Ugh, tell me about it. I once used a phrase abroad that I thought was polite, but it turned out to be super offensive.
Oh no, it just goes to show language is more than just words. It's all wrapped up in culture.
So how do we become more culturally aware as we're learning?
Well, immersion is key.
Mhm.
Movies, TV shows, music, even social media. Get a feel for how English speakers actually interact.
It's like getting a peek into their world, right? Seeing those everyday nuances.
Exactly. Pay attention to body language, tone of voice, all those subtle cues.
I love watching movies with subtitles. It helps catch those little expressions and slang terms.
Great strategy. And don't be afraid to ask questions if something seems weird or confusing.
Okay, switching gears a bit. This next mistake is about falling into a rut, sticking to just one way of learning.
Ah, yes, the one-trick pony approach. Doesn't really work long term.
It's like trying to be a chef, but only knowing how to boil water.
Perfect analogy. You need a variety of tools in your language learning toolbox.
It's like cross-training for your brain, keeps things fresh and challenges different skills.
Exactly. So if you love textbooks, that's great. But maybe also try a language exchange app or find a partner to practice with.
I've even learned a ton from watching cooking shows, picked up food vocab, and even some cultural stuff around meals.
There you go. Learning can happen anywhere. The key is finding what clicks for you.
And what about when that initial motivation starts to fade? We've all hit that wall, right?
Oh, absolutely. You're plugging away, then suddenly it feels overwhelming.
It's like hitting mile 20 in a marathon and your legs are screaming, just quit!
And that little voice in your head chimes in, yeah, maybe this is too hard.
But just like in a marathon, if you push through, you get that amazing feeling of accomplishment.
Exactly. And in language learning, breaking down big goals into smaller steps can help a lot.
Instead of, I'll be fluent in a year, maybe it's, I'll learn 5 new words this week.
That's it. Smaller victories to keep you motivated.
I keep a language learning journal, helps me see how far I've come.
Great idea. It's all about finding what works to keep the momentum going.
Speaking of momentum, what about getting stuck in a rut with just one accent?
Ah, yes. It's like exploring a new city, but only staying in one tiny neighborhood.
You're missing out on so much. English is spoken all over the world, each place with its own flavor.
Right. Exposing yourself to different accents not only helps your listening, but also opens you up to different vocabulary and cultural perspectives.
Makes sense. But where do you even begin?
Start by becoming aware of all the different accents out there. It's amazing how diverse English really is.
I mean, even within the US, you have so many different accents. And then all the varieties from the UK, Australia, it's mind-blowing.
It is. So seek those accents out, movies, podcasts, connect with speakers from different places.
And even if you don't understand everything perfectly, just keep listening.
That's the spirit. Your ear will adjust and you'll start picking up on those nuances.
This kind of ties back to what we were talking about before, right? The one-size-fits-all learning trap.
Exactly. Just like with accents, there's no one perfect method for everyone. What works for one person might not work for another.
So it's all about finding what clicks with your learning style.
100%. Some folks love structured classes, others thrive with self-study. Explore different options and see what you enjoy.
Like building your own language learning buffet. Sample different things and see what you like.
Love it. It's your learning journey. You get to choose the path.
Okay, before we wrap up, we got to talk about the big one. Giving up too soon.
The heartbreak of hitting that wall and feeling like it's just not worth it.
You're making progress, then bam, you feel stuck and that doubt creeps in.
And it can feel so tempting to just throw in the towel.
So how do we stay strong and keep going?
Setting realistic goals, for one. Don't aim for fluency overnight. Break it down into smaller chunks.
It's like that advice about eating an elephant one bite at a time.
Exactly. Make it manageable and celebrate those little wins along the way.
And how about finding ways to make learning fun? If you're dreading it, you're less likely to stick with it.
That's key. Experiment with different resources, find activities you genuinely enjoy, and don't be afraid to take breaks.
Maybe you love learning with music, or you prefer games and quizzes, whatever works.
Exactly. Make it your own. And remember, even small steps forward are still progress.
I love that. It's all about shifting that perspective and remembering why we started learning in the first place.
Absolutely. It's about that love of language, that curiosity to explore a new world.
All right, let's talk about mistakes. Like, really talk about them.
You mean embracing those inevitable slip-ups?
Exactly. I think we often try to avoid them, but they're actually super valuable.
Oh, 100%. They're not failures, they're feedback. Each mistake helps us refine our understanding.
It's like you can't learn to ride a bike without falling a few times.
Right. Those wobbles and stumbles, they teach you balance.
So maybe instead of beating ourselves up over mistakes, we should kind of celebrate them.
I love that. See them as stepping stones, proof that we're learning and growing.
And I bet even fluent speakers make mistakes sometimes, right?
Oh, for sure. Language is a living thing. It's always evolving. We're all constantly learning and adjusting.
So it's okay to not be perfect. In fact, maybe those imperfections are what make language so interesting.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's about embracing that journey of discovery and learning.
I think it's also about finding those people who make the journey more fun.
For sure. Having a supportive community, whether it's friends, teachers, or fellow learners, can make all the difference.
It's like having a cheer squad for your language learning adventure.
Exactly. Someone to celebrate your wins with and encourage you when you stumble.
Speaking of encouragement, what about those times when we feel like giving up? Those moments of doubt when we question our ability to learn.
Oh, those are so real.
Mm.
I think everyone who's ever learned a language has felt that way at some point. It's like hitting a plateau, you're working hard, but not seeing the progress you hoped for.
It's like you're climbing a mountain and suddenly the path gets steeper and you just want to turn back.
Exactly. It's in those moments that we need to dig deep and remember why we started climbing in the first place.
It's about remembering that passion, that desire to connect with the world, to unlock new possibilities.
Beautifully said. It's about reminding ourselves that language learning is a journey, not a race. There will be bumps along the way, but the view from the summit is worth the effort.
And maybe it's even about enjoying those bumps, those stumbles, and those moments of confusion because they're all part of the adventure.
I love that perspective. It's about embracing the messiness of the process and finding joy in those unexpected detours.
All right, one last mistake before we wrap up. This one's about limiting ourselves to just one way of learning.
Ah, yes, the one-track learning trap. We've talked about this with accents, but it applies to learning methods as well.
It's like saying, I'm only going to learn English from textbooks, or I'm only going to use language learning apps.
Right. We need to be open to exploring different approaches and finding what resonates with our individual learning styles.
Some people love structure and routine, while others thrive on flexibility and spontaneity. It's about honoring those preferences and finding what works best for you.
Exactly. And just like with anything in life, variety keeps things interesting.
It's like trying different spices in your cooking. You never know what delicious flavors you might discover until you experiment a little.
I love that. It's about approaching language learning with a sense of curiosity and playfulness and allowing ourselves to try new things.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today, but if there's one thing I hope our listeners take away from this deep dive, it's this. Don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Yes. Embrace those stumbles. See them as opportunities to learn and grow.
And remember, language learning is a journey, not a destination. So enjoy the ride. Yeah, it's like we get so caught up in the end goal, we forget to enjoy the process.
So true. And, thinking back on all these so-called mistakes, it really hits me.
Yeah.
They're not failures at all.
I was just thinking that they're more like those course corrections we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. They guide us, help us get a better grasp of the language.
And honestly, every English speaker, no matter how good they are, has been through that.
100%. We've all made those mistakes as part of how we learn.
Like, we're all in this together, right? Figuring it out as we go.
Absolutely. It's a shared journey. Everyone's stumbling and making progress together.
So before we wrap things up, any final words of wisdom for our fellow language learners?
I'd say don't be afraid to get messy with it. Embrace the mistakes, try new things, push those boundaries.
That's where the real learning happens, right? When we step outside our comfort zones.
Exactly. It's like that's where the magic is.
Love it. Well, on that note, I want to thank everyone for joining us on this deep dive. Keep those questions coming and keep exploring the amazing world of English.
Happy learning, everyone.